I had asked Angelo if he would be willing to do another demo for us for this month, specifically a natural edge bowl. And he said he would, except that he would schedule to do like a 3-day bicycle trip. This blows my mind. I don't do a 1 hour bicycle trip. So, anyhow, so electric bike. Yeah, electric bike. One of those little electric motors. So, my wife said, why don't I do it? And I started laughing because I've only been turning not even 2 years yet. The reason I had asked Angelo is because I won't speak for Tom, but I know that I have a challenge with natural edge bowls with the wings flying around and getting scrape marks and what have you in the upper regions, top of the bowl. So I thought about it, and Angelo volunteered to come to my shop last month. He gave me 2 great hours, sharpening the edge, where the, I'll bring it over here. I'll watch your, sharpening my tools somewhat differently. I didn't have as much of a bevel as he recommended for the scraper, so on and so forth. So all the way through hollowing, although that's not really what the focus tonight will be. So Angelo was invaluable, and I owe a great debt to him. And then on Saturday, John came over here with me for 3 hours or so, and I had never turned Powermatic, so I wanted to make sure I kind of understood its workings, which is pretty straightforward, but still. And John was a big help. So I'm going to turn the outside of a natural edge bowl. Now there's different ways that people do it. I was watching the internet, different ways to mount it. Angelo recommended that for the smaller piece that I'm going to turn, and I have larger blanks, but I've been turning these smaller pieces, to use a screw chuck. So I'm using a screw chuck. You can use what do you call them? Spurs, centers, or what have you. When I was down at David Ellsworth's, that's all we used when we were turning. So I pre-drilled this. This is black cherry from a tree that we had cut down last fall, but I left about a 12-foot trunk on it. And Angelo was looking for.
Why are you screwing that in to the bark side? What orient as to what's going on here?
Okay, so I'm screwing it into the bark side. It's this blank. I have a jig to turn it around, but I don't use it because it doesn't work very well. So it's free-handed. I'm screwing it in, but I'm not screwing it in all the way.
So which side of the bowl is going to be the open bowl?
And the open bowl, I didn't bring these for show and tell as much as I brought them to show you that I've been working through different, over the past week or so, live edge bowls.
So the bark is going to, where the bark is where the open side of the bowl is going to be.
So the bark is at the top, if it stays on. Interestingly, 2 of them stayed on. The 4 that I have here, I have more at home. Some do, some don't, but they're all from the same tree, all cut down at the same time. And it's sitting there for probably 8 months, 9 months. And sprouts are starting to come out of the top of this tree here. So, and the bark stayed on this one.
So by mounting it on the open side over there, you're going to turn the bottom side, right?
So I'm turning the bottom side, and the reason, you can kind of use this like a spur chuck to some extent, if you're trying to align the high and the low edges of the bark, because I can twist it around slightly on the screw. Not like a spur chuck where you can reposition it totally. And that's what I did down at David Ellsworth's place. I was a little intimidated because I'd never done that. Obviously it works, it's just the first few times you do it, it's a little So this is, because it's fairly even, I'm just going to bring the tailstock up. And then I will screw it the rest of the way into the screw chuck, just because that gives me a lot more security when I'm turning. Now, sometimes I've looked at different people. I do kind of 3 steps. I turn the outside, put a tenon on it, I leave a shoulder, so that as I do final turning in my 3rd step, I have some leeway with the shoulder and bringing the form down to the bottom of the bowl. Some people, John, does 2 steps. He makes the foot of the bowl fit perfectly within his jaws, so there's no marks on the bowl. So he turns it, puts a final foot on it, hollows it out, and then he's done. Right?
Well, maybe.
Maybe. I do 3, but I've seen others, I think Richard Raffin and I think Tomislav, they do 4 steps. They rough turn the tenon, flip it around, get a square scraper, and make a deep mortise, flip that around, expand jaws into the mortise, turn it. I mean, it's like 4 steps, which I was surprised to see somebody like Richard Raffin take 4 steps to turn it, but he's been doing it for 56 years, I think he said the other day. So that was pretty interesting. This is wet. Some of the plank that I was turning the other day, water was coming off of it, even though the tree was cut down last early fall. The trunk preserved the pretty much almost like fresh wood, not quite. And that's it. So I'm going to flatten the bottom, and it's fairly flat. I used, when I got David's chuck last year, or chuck, his bowl gouge, and he designed it so that it could do pretty much everything, one tool for the entire bowl. And I would use that to rough this out, except that since I don't want to sharpen it while we're demonstrating, I also have a Glenn Lucas bowl gouge. And this, frankly, I find that it plows through more quickly than I can with David's bowl gouge. That's about 600. The bottom of the flute is about at center. By the way, I should have said, not only do I owe John and Angelo thanks, but all the members for putting up with this. My initial reason to do it was to learn how to turn a natural edge bowl by watching Angelo. Well, there was nothing like making 6 or 7 or 8 of these things in the past week to learn how to make one, especially after the 2 sessions that I had. But I also did it because my responsibility now as the vice president is primarily to get demonstrators at the meeting. And I thought, if I'm not willing to demonstrate, how can I ask somebody else to demonstrate? And then because we have members that have various levels of experience and proficiency on the lathe, I kind of wanted to demonstrate that I'm not a very proficient woodturner, less than 2 years. So I wanted to encourage anybody that is, first of all, just bring your work to show. And second of all, if you're interested in demonstrating, please do. I think you can probably get as much out of this watching somebody that is not as experienced as somebody who can whip through something really quickly. And you go, wow, that was fast. How do you do that? So, and also, as I'm going through this, if somebody sees something that they think I could do differently and better, please say so. And if you want to know, maybe I've skipped over why I'm doing something, just ask and we'll talk about it.
So maybe I'll do that. When you're doing the screwing the chuck in,
yeah,
you actually drilled a flat spot so that it won't wobble, right?
Correct. It's not a precise flat spot, but I took the bark off.
Right, because it's gotta, I mean, my understanding or my expectation is if that's not actually flat up against the screw chuck,
Right.
it'll wobble and break the screw, right?
It could. Now, this also has a shoulder, whatever this piece is called, a ring that goes around it. If you have a wider piece of wood, a bigger piece of wood, but because this is not terrifically big and it already has a sizable diameter, that fits up pretty tightly against the entire piece of wood. And because it's somewhat wet, it compresses against it, so it's in there pretty securely. In fact, when I was turning it, taking it off, I had a hell of a time unscrewing this couple times.
Doesn't putting in the tail stock a little bit negate the wobble on the head stock?
It will.
No matter how well I put a piece of wood on the blade, it's always wobbling. That's how you get that first round. So
Yeah, exactly. And so obviously you need to have the tailstock up when you're using this. I think a screw chuck.
But you're trying to make a reference surface there, aren't you? Flat surface to work from.
And that's what I'm doing here.
Yeah.
And so I don't want any wobble. I need to have this flat because I'm going to make a tenon and then a shoulder, and it has to be flat to go into the jaws. And the jaws that I'm going to use are these step jaws. And so in the process of doing this, first of all, the goal is to make, and these are dovetail, so the goal is to make a tenon that is only as deep as the first level. That's my goal, because that's going to be the biggest tenon that I can get out of this chuck. The other thing is, I can only make it this deep. If I make it deeper, then there's not going to be the body of the bowl will not sit on the top surface of the jaws, which is what I'm trying to accomplish. So for that, it seems a little silly because it's not very much, but I measure it with calipers just to make sure that I can quickly go like that and make sure that it's, because a couple times I turned it too deep and then I have to just go back and peel a little bit off.
have you used a worm screw mounted in the chuck before? Have you done
I
that?
have, yes.
Okay. Is that the chuck will act as a flat spot and you don't need to actually remove anything from your piece. You just screw it on the worm screw up against the chuck if you have that set up.
Yeah, I do, but for some reason this is just very simple because it's one piece and works fast. Yep,
For those
but you're
who
right.
have what you have on the lathe
Yep.
there, right?
Yep. John told me he doesn't want, you guys don't want sparklers, you want fireworks, so he told me I had to be aggressive. We'll see.
It's worth mentioning what's going on there,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
when you first started doing this, it was all bumpity.
Well, so I got the bottom relatively smooth, not perfectly smooth, but relatively smooth. And because the outside, even though it's somewhat round, if I was trying to take that down from the surface, the tool would be going back and forth. But because I entered it from the side, I'm below the surface. And when you work below the surface of a, and it doesn't, I mean, I brought two of the funkiest blanks in here on Saturday,
I realized they were stupid blanks. I mean, I didn't cut them properly. They were like a V cut with a little flat on the bottom. So I had a lot of chunking going on. But once I got to the point where, even though there was a lot of air, once I started going inside, turning those wonky blanks was a whole lot smoother than trying to smooth it from the outside. Plus, when I'm turning this, it's level and it's about probably a 45 degree with the bevel against the surface of the wood. And I use my body to brace it. And now I'm going to mark where I need to turn the tenon. I don't know if that shows up. It's 7:30. Actually 10 to 8. The speed is 7:30. I like using the Ellsworth for this because it's got a longer edge. If you do it a couple times, you kind of get the hang of it.
Yeah,
Kind of, somewhat. I'll get the download from John later. And David Ellsworth said, you know, the process is very efficient. Flatten it, get the tenon, come out, turn the shoulder, and then proceed down. I mean, it's almost one series of movements. also, at some point, you can drop it about 30 degrees. And if you picked up one of the Ellsworth bowl gouge instructions, it's all in there on how David intends this to be used. If you drop it down, you get more of a shear cut and a better finish on the wood. Now I'm going to come in from this side and see if I can preserve the bark.
About preserving the bark?
Yes. So I try to come in at approximately the same angle that the lower part when I'm going up towards the top of the bowl. So I try to set this at the same angle as that, and then look down where I can see the shadow of, I can kind of see the shadow of the top, and just bring it in ever so slightly. I don't want to take too much off, and just push it in, keeping it the same distance away from the blank, and I can use my hand or my wrist against the tool rest to help modulate. Plus I can do it a little bit with angling the tool up and down, and then finding the sweet spot by spinning the tool in my hand.
And does that mean the bark stays on you more readily, or is it?
Pushing it helps it stay on. Otherwise, I'd be pushing it off the blank. Pushing into it will help keep it, if it's going to stay. This probably won't because it was cut. The tree was cut down last fall, and then I just took the trunk, the 12-foot trunk down a couple weeks ago. So it's not winter wood by any stretch. And I hear that winter wood actually tends to keep the bark on it more than summer or other seasons. Did that address what you're thinking? So I haven't brought the top part down to this yet. And I'm not going to do that much more here. I may make it a little bit more of a cove, but that's effectively it once I get this top cut. And since I'm going to finish this in the third step, I'm going to finish the bottom of the third step, I don't worry too much about what's going on at the base right now because that's all going to get tweaked a bit when I come up with the finished shape, the final shape, when I turn off the tenon in the third step. What I have a bit of a dovetail here, but it's got a bit of a cove in it. So I'll use the spindle gouge.
John, maybe you said it and I missed it. Are you trying to match that dovetail that is on the chuck?
Yeah, I tend to over exaggerate it.
I think it's worth pointing out that when you started fooling around with this, it took you a long time to get to a reasonable bolt length. And so, how many did you make to get to be proficient at it? 10?
7
or 8?
7 or 8.
Yeah.
I mean, I think my fourth or fifth one, I did it in 15 minutes.
Yeah. So, but this was very smooth. A whole lot smoother than it was when you were here early Saturday morning.
Well, especially because those were really ridiculous blanks.
Well, yeah, but also it's we've been having a conversation about whether practicing makes any sense because some guys don't want to do anything more than once.
Right.
And I think that you've just shown us that do it a half a dozen times; it'll make a difference.
Well, and I don't know who said this. Mike Peace or somebody said on Coffee Hour a couple of weeks ago. I don't know. Somebody said, a musician who knows their instrument backwards and forwards doesn't have to think about the mechanics of it. They can think about the artistry of it. And it's the same thing with this.
It's the same thing.
I mean, there's nothing better than actually seeing something and going, okay, now how am I going to deal with that and have the confidence that you know exactly how to use the tool in the situation that's at hand. There's a wonky piece of wood over here that I turned the other day, and because it was the last one and my lovely wife has not seen me for about a week because I've been in the shop turning bowl after bowl after bowl, I thought I'd make her something, and she's a gardener, so I made it look like a pot, a flower pot. But the wood has a knot in it, it had a branch going through it, the bark inclusion went down, and it stayed on, and it's pretty deep. And I was like having a heck of a time getting down inside of it. So I thought I'd try the Richard Raffin scraper technique. And thanks to Angelo, I changed this from 80 to 60, and I got a really nice burr using the Lee Valley burnisher. And then I got a Henry Taylor, and I actually haven't used this. It's a 45, so that might be too much, but we'll see. Because I was able to get down into that all over here with the with this scraper and tipped it up on its edge as I came back up through the thinner side. But then I was able to take this, and because of the way David's designed this, you can go pretty deep in a bowl and get to the bottom and make a turn. And I couldn't see exactly where the tool was, but I could see on the other side of the bottom of the bowl what it was doing, because I could see the wood disappearing in the shelf. And then I just turned the corner and I could feel when it was on center, and I just kind of rotated gently towards the center, and then the nub just kind of disappeared. It was almost magic. The only thing that I didn't get very good at, and I'm still not, and I wouldn't do it here, his interior finishing cut is like a suicide mission, because typically you're cutting on the bottom edge, riding the bevel when you go in. For his final cut, he uses the upper edge and turns the flute vertical and just spins it ever so slightly and just takes, like, I don't know, hairs off the inside of the bowl for a final cut. No scrapers allowed. And I was probably 3 or 4 inches down in that, and I said, well, what the hell? What have I got to lose? So I tried it, and I actually was successful because I've learned that really, really delicate cuts are hard to make unless you've got the tool grounded, you've got the tool settled, and then you see where you are, and little hairs just started coming off the wood, you know, probably this far over the tool rest. And then, of course, as I couldn't see where the curve was, and I got it almost to catch, and there's a little ridge in the bottom that I just couldn't get out, and I said, the heck with it.
You gloss over one of a very important learning, though, and that is when you couldn't see it, you had to depend on your feeling of the cut and the feel of the tool.
Exactly.
And that still continues on after you can see it again.
Yeah, yeah.
But until you're forced not to see it.
Well, so I've only turned one hollow form. You know, it's not big. It's about this big, and the opening's maybe that big. But you can't see what you're turning. You can't see it, so you just have to kind of feel your way around inside there, and it's a fascinating experience. I mean, I've got another one on getting ready to go, and I'll keep going. But when I look at some of the, like, I keep saying David because I took his class and looked at his book, but, you know, his hollow forms have an opening this big. I don't know how he does it, except he makes his tools out of, like, Allen keys and things like that. It's remarkable.
So you're going to turn that around and turn the inside of that now? You got time since you
Yes,
short-cheated us out of a coffee break and a short sale, so you might as well go ahead for it.
Well, it's 8 o'clock. Does everybody want to take a quick break? I'll reverse it if you want to take a break.
John, just to follow on what you were just talking about, an additional thing, it's a psyche thing. When you're making something and you can't see what's going on, the way you learn about it is you do it and you don't care if it comes apart. You don't care if you fail.
Right.
So that you do it.
Right.
If you get it out of your head, it doesn't matter that you fail. It matters that you tried and learned. Do it again.
Yep.
You wear your face shield while you're doing this and something grenades. Oh well. Worst thing that's going to happen, you might get a bruise in your chest if you play with the pieces I play with. But it's, if you could just tell yourself, I don't care, I'm going to try it. And just fail. See what happens.
Well,
you will get there so much faster.
You're right, Carl.
You will
And
achieve so much more quickly.
And it's not just at the lathe. Let me tell you. So this tree, there's I think he got a 4-foot section left of 13 feet and Angelo wanted some blanks as well, so I gave him a bunch of blanks. But I made so many blanks this past week, more than I've ever made except for Ernie's session. And let me tell you, I got a lot to learn at the bandsaw as well. Our daughter came over on Sunday, and we turned a pretty hefty chunk of, turned out to be mulberry that she got from her neighbor that cut the tree down. And she turned a lot of it. But she, you know, we went out back, I cut the piece off the log, put it on the bandsaw. I didn't screw up when she was there, so I didn't embarrass myself in that regard. And she said, wow, there's a lot that goes into making something like this. And I said, well, yeah, it doesn't happen by itself, you know? And she dug it. She goes, wow, this is really cool. And she was afraid, you know, because she's a budding surgeon, she's afraid that she was going to, like, mess her career up by, you know, messing her hands up or something. And the only other thing she had ever turned was a little piece of cherry about this big, probably, I don't know, a year ago or whatever. So this piece of mulberry, I think it was, we put it on lathe and it was probably 10 and a half, 11 inches in diameter. She attacked it. I mean, she wasn't crazy aggressive or stupid about it, which can get a little tiring, as you know, when you watch somebody like John watched me for 45 minutes on my first outside of this last week or Saturday. But she went at it. But it's not just at the lathe. You know, I had all kind of issues with the bandsaw, the path cutting blanks. It's not a intuitive thing to do. This is more intuitive in some regards than, to me, it is, than messing with the bandsaw.
Keep her away from the bandsaw. Not good for surgeons.
Yeah, I'm not. You're right. Sam Angelo learned that, I think, right? Sam Angelo's missing the upper.
So speaking of missing fingers, can I ask you another question, John?
You can ask me anything, though.
You always wear your wristwatch when you're turning?
This is a Mike Peace thing with his wedding band. I tend to.
Because that's another thing that can catch. Just from
Yeah.
a safety point of view.
You're right.
That band will snap.
You're right.
That's one of those eye watches.
Will you feel better if I take it off?
Yes.
There you go.
But you're going to leave your shirt on, right?
What about the beard?
I haven't attempted that with a tool yet. Actually, I did shave it off one time because I didn't think my wife and daughter liked it. And they said, "Why'd you do that for?" I said, "Well, am I too ugly?" I grew it back. So again, this is at center. Well, it is not at center. It is the bottom of the flute is at center.
Check your rotation. Make sure it clears the tool rest. Sorry, it's a good habit for you to demonstrate that.
It absolutely is. You're right. These are all going into my, hopefully my memory bank for demonstrating.
With an irregular face like that, that's why I said that. I don't mean the one on your head.
So this is about 700 something. And I knew this would have to come off. So Angelo's, not a trick, technique is whatever bevel you're creating in here, if it's a good, decent bevel, come out at that same angle, maintain it, and then go into the bark. And don't take too much bark because it's pretty crazy. So I'm fairly sure the reason that it's bouncing so much is because one or both of two things. Either I'm trying to take too much wood, maybe it's three. I may not be at center, or may not have bevel in contact with the wood.
Is that center hole when you drill it
Yes,
looks like it's
it is. Now, sometimes I drill the depth hole to turn to that hole. Sometimes I don't. I mean, I measure it as I go along and just take a look at it.
John, it
Yes.
looks like you choke up. You use your right hand with choked up much further up to on the handle instead of having your hand further back, so you maintain some leverage.
So, Mike, what I try to do, you're right, what I try to do, though, often is lock it against my elbow and my body, and use my body and turn it.
Okay, I see that now. Yeah.
That makes sense?
Yeah.
I guess it's a different technique. Sometimes I'll hold it back here, but somehow I feel like I can get a little bit more control because I've got a third point that's kind of got to hold it. Whereas if I put it back here, then my elbow's flying out here.
Okay.
Hey, John,
Yeah.
I have another question.
Yes, sir.
Why are you going as slow as 600 or 750? My goal when turning is to get up to 1500 if I can as soon as possible. Usually I end up around 1250. Is there a reason you're going so slow?
No, I was thinking I might turn it up. I was just seeing what the wood was like, but in fact, that may also help some of the jumping around.
Right.
What number do you want, Jim?
1,000. I wouldn't jump to 1,500 like Jim. I'm not that brave.
Well, I will usually end about 1250 because I have to switch to another mode to get 1500.
Well, the one that I turned over there, I had it up to 1,500 when I was doing the inside, and it was pretty good.
Well, I was just wondering, Hey, the other question I have, when you put the wood in the chuck, you only tightened it from one side. I noted that because I worried that you didn't have it set tight enough from both sides.
You only need one. Screw chucks by design only need one.
Well, but
They always tell me to do it opposite sides.
well, in this case, I can tighten it up some more because the wood is wet and bouncing. So that may also have been why it was bouncing a little bit. We'll see.
That's why I mentioned it. Yeah.
Just for fun, I'm going to see what the Glenn Lucas bowl is like, or gouge.
You know what vibrating?
Not as much.
Wondering if you can feel it all. But
Yeah, there's some.
Can you back out the camera just a little bit so we can see your body motion? I'm not convinced you've got your elbow on the tool the whole time, John.
Oh, I was thinking about that, Mike, because I didn't.
And as a result, you only have a ratio of about 3 to 1 behind the tool post overhang.
Right.
If you have your hand all the way back toward the end, you can
Right.
anchor it. You can anchor it against your body just fine. Then you start having 5 to 1, 6 to 1, and you got a lot more leverage.
I'll give that a shot right now.
Especially when you have a fulcrum like I have down here in the middle section.
Well, I'm working on that.
There you
Turning
go.
muscle.
Got it. Question. I was watching you kind of keeping your hand to the away from the business end of the tool rest. And so at the very end right there, you kind of put your hand over. And I'm just wondering,
Bad idea.
bad idea, especially with the natural heat.
No, you're right. It's a bad idea.
So kind of use the safety of that tool rest to say if you stay on that side, you're going to be fine.
I should paint a little sign here.
Not cross.
Like yellow.
Another question, John. When I'm turning a bowl, I often like to have the end of the tool rest as deep inside of the bowl as I can get it, so I don't have as much tool hanging over.
Yeah, it was probably about time to spin it a little bit to go in. I mean, these are pretty heavy tools. It's wet wood, but you kind of need every advantage you can get, right?
What's the diameter of that bowl?
5 inches of
Yeah, this it's probably about 6 inches. I'm guessing.
why the question, Mike?
Yeah, why? Have to do
Well,
it.
a general rule of thumb for speed is the diameter in inches times RPM should fall between 6,000 and 9,000.
So 6 inches times 1,000 is 6,000. So it's the low end of. So Jim Bowman would be happy
Yeah,
with.
with a bowl that small, you could get up to 1,500 safely.
Right. I will say that last cut was pretty smooth with this gouge, and keeping my hand safely behind the tool rest, and repositioning my hand as Mike suggests.
Can I ask another question?
Yes.
I noticed when you're getting down to the bottom of the bowl that your tool is still at the same angle.
Yeah, it's tending to go flat at the bottom.
Well, I remember that when I was doing this, it almost you want to open up the tool just as you're getting down toward the bottom instead of keeping it the same angle. Is that
So as I get to here,
just further down, just towards the very bottom when you're down at the very
down here,
yeah. When I'm hearing vibration at the very bottom, and that's the point where I start to turn just to open up the tool a little bit. Just to,
like this?
yeah.
Okay.
Tiny bit.
Want to see how thin we are. Well, it's 8:27. You don't want to watch me hollow the rest of this damn bull, do you?
We don't want you sand it.
I'm waiting for the finish.
Just one more thing.
Yes, sir.
When you're coming around, you're actually working above center. You know that?
Is it?
You're cutting, where you're cutting is actually above center.
Okay.
So that's going to impact how you get through that center you're always cutting. You're
Yeah.
going to get to the middle of the nipple.
Right.
You're cutting above it.
Okay.
So keep that in mind.
Yep.
Speed is your friend, but I'm watching your left arm here, and I'm just saying this because I want you to be aware of it. So you're coming around. Here's your tool rest. Your arm. You're out over the running plane, and it's a bad muscle memory thing for you to get into. I'm just worried about you picking up this bad habit. It's not hard to do. So you're working out here. Take advantage of leverage. This is why everybody makes their grip for themselves, but it's out here. Right? Mike's right about that. Where your tool rest is right now, you're forced to cut when you're down here. You're cutting up top. Your tool rest should be a good bit further down.
Okay.
But also now, when you're working here, you're cutting high above center. But if you're center, see where my left arm is?
Yeah.
That's what you've been doing. That's a bad place to be.
Okay.
Because if your tool rest is just a little loose and you don't pick up on it, or you're doing something else, you're very tense when you're doing this. You're very tense. One of the things that Ellsworth tells you, sorry guys, I'm just trying to be helpful, is that you want to dance with this. And dancing is about fluidity. So you want to be firm in your grip. You want to be firm but loving to your child that you're birthing here. So you want to have a good grip on your tool, but coming around, this is a tough spot to be. I'm going to get clobbered if this machine's running.
Right.
My hand's getting just whipped. So that's why the comment about your tool rest there,
Right.
you're working over here now.
So you're
Okay.
working at a significant angle as opposed to having it flat.
When I'm cutting, I'm coming through like this, and when I finish, I can come through like this. But my tool rest is here. I'm providing myself a shield and a guide.
So it's angled back further away from the top of the bowl.
It's also, right, so I'm not working over here. I don't, this is a safety fence. Use it that way. Be in the habit of doing this with everything you do. Unless you purposely are not doing it, then you won't get in trouble. So
why would I purposefully do it?
But there are times where you have to break the rule. Like, you're a nice guy, but today you're going to beat the shit out of that guy because he was a jerk. But usually, you go over and you talk to him, it's nice with him. But occasionally, you got to break a rule or break a neck. But be in the habit. Your muscle memory keeps you back here.
Okay.
Sorry,
That's good. That's why I'm doing this.
I'm worried because you're going to lose the park right here. And then your daughter's going to have to come show us how to suture it.
Thank you.
I hope it helps.
Good. That's why I'm doing this. So, with that, I'm not going to turn the rest of this now and make you all sit here. Why don't we take a quick break and then we'll go and tell, unless people have other questions.
How are you going to shape the bottom of that, John? Because you got a really thick bottom because you didn't tuck it under because of that big jaw set, and you don't have a secondary foot.
Right. Hey, did you hear that one? 80 grit.
80 grit, okay.
I would put it. I have a couple of jam chucks, and I'll put it in a jam chuck. I don't know which one fits. That's kind of small, but I put it in a jam chuck and bring the tailstock up and probably leave something in the bottom, and then shape it, taper it more. As it gets to the bottom of the bowl. But typically, you're right, Mike. Typically, I would put a shoulder on it, use smaller jaws. But for this exercise, I was looking for stability primarily.
But unfortunately, you got the stability, but now you've got a situation where the size of the chuck jaws forces you into a design that you may or may not be happy with because the bottom is so big and so thick and it doesn't tuck under.
Right. You're right.
It's a kind of a slab, kind of a straight side.
Yes, you're correct.
Hey, John, I have one other question. It goes back to when you made the foot. Why didn't you use the straight scraper and just go straight into the diameter, then grab your skew that's 15 and go in, and you're done. You don't have to try to do it with a gouge and try to do it with a spindle gouge. Sorry, that's the way I do it. Just a square straight scraper straight in at the distance you need.
Right.
Slap the skew on and you got it. Right like that. And it's the right angle.
Jim, Jim, describe again how you're coming in with the scraper. Are you coming in straight into the headstock, or are you coming in sideways?
No, I'm coming straight in at the tailstock, back when he was making the foot.
So if this was reversed and the tailstock's up here, you just take a skew or a scraper and you just...
No, that's a terrible idea.
That's what you're... Right?
Because you can't take a peeling cut on side grain. That thing's gonna grab.
Yeah.
I've been turning all day a couple bowls and none of them grab.
Now, Jim, your way is different from what John was showing, but that's what I was asking you, Jim. Do you come in toward the headstock, or are you coming in the way that John's showing it now?
Just like that, straight in.
Oh.
I lay the square.
Okay. I would never do that, and I'm not sure you're going to find too many people that'll recommend it because.
And what, Mike? Why is that not a good idea?
Well, you're getting in grain coming around twice, and that scraper is not designed to hit the in grain like that. That's why you use a bowl gouge to slice it.
All right.
I've used sometimes, Jim, to. If I've got the foot, or if I've got the tenon more or less square, I might use a skew slightly below center to just finish off a little bit of a dovetail, but I don't take any substantial amount of wood off jamming a skew into the side of the bowl.
I was not using a skew. I was using a square nose scraper going straight in, and then using the skew to give me the 15 degrees for the dove.
Jim, if you turn your scraper 90 degrees and you come straight into the headstock, then you've got a different situation. That's okay.
You're saying if you do this?
Yes, that's okay.
Well, that's
more of a peeling cut.
And that's how Richard Rappin hollows a lot of his bowls.
Exactly. But if you come in sideways, sooner or later, it's going to bite you big time.
Okay. Well, I guess I learned something. But
let's see.
Yeah.
No CA glue, Jim, and no more scrapers on the end grain or on.
I'm sorry, CA glue is my friend. So
I know.
I'm loving where this because this is good cathartic for everybody. The other thing, so I use one-way chucks. That's my dominant chuck, 17 of them, and then 2 Vic marks. Not bragging, I've got the point where it's a different set of draws for every situation. So I don't do dovetail often, but I always just use my eye. I've trained my eye to do either a dovetail or a square edge cut. I don't measure my tenons. I don't measure my mortises. I've trained myself to know my ranges. Right. When you do that, this is the concept of the technique. Learn how to do the technique. Learn the muscle memory. Learn the process. You will move so much faster through all of these things and get so much better. So, I am not against the idea of the props and the tools, but if we can learn, I turn a bowl with one tool. Sometimes, if I need a small detail, I grab the detail gouge, but I'll turn the whole bowl from rough to finish with a bowl gouge.
In fact,
tenon or mortise included.
I think I did that for some of these, just using the Ellsworth gouge.
Right, and you should be able to get your dovetail or your tenon with that gouge.
Yep.
You don't need any other tool. You can use other tools.
In fact, it's actually a good angle.
Yeah.
You just back it off a little bit because you don't want to crack, then it's too much.
Absolutely. And now I just wanted to reinforce that if you learn the technique and the finesse, you can do almost anything with 1 or 2 tools all the way through.
Yep.
So the point is, you don't have to have a ton of tools
Right.
to be a really good turner, because 1,000 years ago they didn't have high-speed steel in 1,000 different variations.
And they didn't have sandpaper.
Yeah, they had the nails of all the people they captured and used those.
That was one.
So,
Okay.
I'm gonna be-
Can you explain the difference between the Ellsworth grind and a regular bowl gouge grind?
The Ellsworth grind, I mean, I'm sure Carl or others can do it technically much better than I, but basically it was designed to be able to do everything that you're trying to accomplish with this tool. It's fine enough that you could, the angle is such that you can get around to at the bottom of a fairly deep bowl. I got around that one down there. There's probably 4, 5, 6 inches down there. You can do a nice scraping, shear scrape, by turning it almost vertically, and it'll do a really nice finish. You don't, like Raffin will use a scraper. Well, this will act as a shear scraper because it's got really long wings, and then it's good for roughing it out. So, whereas, and you saw how aggressive I was getting with the Glen Lucas, but I think that's, I don't know if that's 50 degrees, and then it's got relief on the bottom to get around the bottom more.
He's got a micro bevel on his, it's an Irish grind.
Right.
Of course, he happens to be Irish.
Right.
The Ellsworth is a modified or variation of the Irish grind, or the Irish is a variation of the Ellsworth. Take your pick. There's a 40-40. The Ellsworth is close to a 60. There's other variations on this. You're going to find one, and you're going to run with it. And as you learn to sharpen, you'll modify it to your own comfort.
Right.
Yeah, you can still put the secondary bevel on any grind.
Yeah.
I have an Ellsworth, and I put the secondary bevel on that.
Yep.
Helps on the
I
inside.
don't know if you can see it, but there's clearly Ellsworth is longer. The bevel is much longer than, in this case, the Glen Lucas.
But you can put a long grind on the Glen Lucas.
Yeah.
Right. You know, it's
Right.
to me, what you're talking about is a fluted gouge or whatever, and whatever you use that's comfortable for you is the most important part.
Right. And frankly, the reason I brought the Glen Lucas and I practiced with it before coming here, I mean, I use it quite a bit, but I can get more aggressive quicker with that than I can with the Ellsworth bowl gouge for some reason. I don't know.
Well, he's a very aggressive turner. He's a production turner.
Right.
I remember going to a demonstration he did, and he showed us how he basically formed the outside and the inside of a bowl in something like, it was like less than half a minute.
Yeah.
I mean, and it was a pretty good sized chunk of wood.
Well, I'm going to do the September demo, and I'll do it in
Okay.
45 seconds.
Two follow-ons. Stuart Batty, English turner, is going to be at Mawatts. He's 40-40, and he is a religious zealot when it comes to his 40-40. He'll tell you, anybody can turn with anything, but if you're good, you'll turn with a 40-40.
Right.
And then he wants you to buy his tools.
Right.
But Jim, you brought up something, and this is a safety thing I know a lot of people are not aware of, so I wanted to bring it up. CA glue. I don't know if you guys know this, but CA is exothermic, reactive exothermically. So it reacts with wool and cotton. So if you, for some reason, are CA glue, super glue, and you're filling something or doing something, there's any quantities of it, and you're using a bit of cotton rag or cloth or wool, you need to treat that as if it's going to self-ignite, because it may. It's okay with paper, with typically like paper towel, but it can react exothermically enough to ignite, just like you can have spontaneous combustion with oil-based finishes. So I just wanted everybody to be aware of that, because most people are not aware of that. It doesn't happen often, but it does happen, and cotton and wool are the ones. Leather technically, but it doesn't seem to happen so much anymore. But just be aware of that. If you're using super glue, CA glue, in any quantities, especially for finishing a pen or whatever, be aware of that. Set it outside or light it on fire to get rid of it. But don't leave that rag just laying around.
The other thing that I have noticed, maybe I'm just super sensitive. If I have CA glued something like bark to hold it and then I sand it or pick away at that CA, the fumes, I went and got my mask, my power cap with the filters that cut out that stuff because it just made my eyes burn like crazy. Now this is cured. There's another safety issue there as well, I guess.
Yeah.
Indeed, there are two things about CA. First, continued exposure to the CA fumes can make you sensitive to them. There are some pen makers that just can't be even in the same room with CA. The other thing to do is, if you're going to use an applicator with CA, use closed cell foam. You can get it at the hobby store. It goes under the name of foam. It's about 1/8 of an inch thick. CA will not soak through it.
I'm not using it as a finish like you pen turners do. I use it to fill voids and stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I think we've had a fairly major discussion on tooling. For the people who are maybe novice or new around here, I think the most important thing you get is, to me, it's be comfortable with your tools, number one. And if you have to use 3 right now, nobody else is in your shop.
Right.
And nobody's looking at you.
Right.
Use what's comfortable and safe. And if you need another tool, go for it and continue to practice. But don't just say, well, I'm not any good because I used one tool. I have yet to have anybody pick up a bowl at a show and say, how many tools did you use?
Oh, come on, Doug. You know Turners are thinking that when they pick it up. Come on.
The Turners are, but they're not the ones that are actually buying my stuff. So, you know.
Hey, Doug.
I'm trying to make.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I just follow up, Doug. I didn't want to make that it's bad to only use one. I was just trying to say it's a good idea to try to achieve that.
That's a good target to put in.
Well, and it's very more pleasurable because you can turn more.
Right. There you go.
I mean, that's.
I would love to have a discussion about this. I think it's a pride thing or a haughty thing about turners being, I can do one tool and get the whole thing. I'm sorry, that's bullshit to me. So maybe we need to talk about that Thursday morning, maybe, because I get tired of hearing about that. Oh, I turned this with one tool. I'm sorry, I got a rack full of tools and use them nearly all. So
I agree with you on that, Jim.
I have a rack full of tools too, but I'm saying the idea is, if you watch Raffin, he's the example we keep using. He's only using a limited set of tools to do an awful lot of work in many forms, sizes, and woods. So it's about tool comfort and the ability to maximize the tool's capacity. That's all I'm bringing up is trying to learn those finesses for those who are interested in doing it. I'm not trying to say you suck if you do it with 15 tools or one tool. I'm just pointing out that it is doable, so it's something to potentially embrace. If not, fine. So,
well, thank everybody. I appreciate your comments, your helpful suggestions.
Thank you. That was great.